Formula One has some of the best looking cars on the planet. What makes these cars beautiful? The liveries. But guess what? Not every livery is beautiful. And there are quite a few really disgusting liveries during the Formula One time. But while we have 10 current teams on the actual grid, I wanted to make a list of what from those 10 teams is their worst looking livery that they've had. So if you guys watched the iconic team liveries, obviously I had restrictions on them. I wanted to pick a good looking or iconic livery for each team. Now, one of the comments that I got was that it should be every other team in history that was related to that team. I didn't do that for that last video. For this video, I made the exception for 3 teams. It's for Aston Martin, Alpine, and AlphaTauri. Those are the 3 teams that I decided there weren't enough ugly liveries to be like, okay, we're not going to be doing that. So those 3 teams have liveries that aren't technically from Aston Martin itself, Alpine itself, and AlphaTauri itself. They're from their past counterparts, if that makes sense. To start the video, I wanted to introduce us with some honorable mentions that aren't currently with teams, but are just horrible looking liveries. 1976 Hesketh 308D. What the hell? I mean, it speaks for itself. This livery is disgusting. I don't know who was thinking this was going to be a good idea. And actually, the whole thing behind this livery was that the driver actually wanted the girl on the front to be fully naked, but obviously they weren't going to allow something like that to happen, so this was their compromise to the car, the livery itself. I mean, what a shit show. This livery is disgusting. Oh, terrible livery. I wish I could have added it with some of the teams because it is so bad. Another honorable mention I had was actually the 1999 Bar 01. One of the coolest names for a Formula One car, but one of the worst liveries that I've ever seen. I mean, it's just a mess. The blue, the red, the yellow. I mean, like, it looks like a Goodyear car on one side, and I don't even know on the other side what it's supposed to look like. It looks like a bad painted tattoo, the ones that people get that are colored, and I don't know. It just looks terrible, and even like the gray nose. It's a zipper. Oh, I didn't even notice that. Wow, this car is awful looking. And the car you saw on the thumbnail, 1979 Shadow DN9. I mean, this car is atrocious. It is a one-off livery, and the livery wasn't like this the whole year, but who decided this would look good? I mean, just look at it on the thumbnail and you can see that it's just one of the worst looking pieces of garbage ever. So those 3 cars had to be mentioned in this video because it is about disgusting liveries, and these 3 are disgusting. Now let's get into the actual list with the 10 teams. I started us off pretty easy. I went with McLaren, and with McLaren, I decided to pick the 2018 one. And what really sets me off on why I think this car is really ugly, first of all, its performance is trash, but the actual car itself, the full orange with just like the little hints of blue and the dark blue, looks terrible. It's not good. The car doesn't look good, but what makes the car look so bad in the actual livery itself is that it has no sponsors. Like at the very beginning of the year when they had barely any, it just looked awful. It looked so plain and boring, and they didn't really have like more defined side pods back in 2018 like they do now. So it just makes the car look so basic. It just kind of looks like a toy car, and the orange just looks awful. By the way, also things they had on the side pods, the little winglets that they added to add for aerodynamic effect, made the car look even worse. So there really wasn't any saving this piece of trash. For Williams, I went with a surprise. This team feels like it has no identity throughout its years, but we kind of solidify Williams with blue or white or colors like that. They decided to throw out the whole entire field and went with a red livery. And why they did that? I don't know, because it actually looks pretty damn awful. But yeah, they thought that would be a good idea, going with a red livery on a Williams car with a blue logo. Yeah, it didn't look good. For Renault, actually, it's Renault. This is your Alpine team. They had a couple of pretty bad liveries, but the one that I thought was the worst was the 2007 Renault. Keep in mind also, they just came off of winning 2 years in a row with Fernando Alonso in '05 and '06 with a beautiful, one of the most iconic liveries of all time, the blue and yellow. And they give us this piece of garbage. Like, look at how messy this just looks. By the way, like, the top of the car, I'll show a picture. It just looks like, I can't, there's no words that I can use to really just explain this car. It is a complete pile of mess and the worst Renault powered engine car that I have ever seen. McLaren 2018 gives it a run for its money. Now for Mercedes, your 8-time constructors, champions of the world, kings of Formula One in the past decade. Well, the only livery that I really think is terrible on the Mercedes car was the 2010 one, and you'll see a common theme, I think, between these liveries. Typically, sponsors, if they're not set in the right spots and if there's too little of them, it makes the car look ugly, and the Mercedes suffered that problem. Specifically for the fact that it didn't have much sponsors and it was just very plain. I mean, like, you could barely actually see that Petronas had any blue on this car. They added on the rims, but the actual livery itself kind of looked, when there's not enough color and it's not added correctly, it looks like a toy car. And this car looked like a toy car. It only looked good when the super red helmet was in it, and that made it look kind of cool. But other than that, though, this looked pretty garbage and definitely the worst Mercedes livery we've had since it being a team in Formula One. Now, for Alfa Romeo, if you guys have watched any of my videos, you know that this is a car that I consistently make fun of. It is that Baku 2022 special livery that Alfa Romeo pulled off. Pulled off, jokingly. They did not pull off anything. If anything, they just made us hurt our eyes during the race because they sucked and the livery looked terrible. What they were thinking with this green, white, and red livery, maybe they were trying to go for like an Italian flag. Maybe that sponsor was supposed to be prominent on its green or whatever. I mean, if anything, it just made us look away, so it didn't really do its job of making the car show off the sponsor more. It just made us look away, and it was a terrible looking car. And it ruined a beautiful looking Alfa Romeo throughout the whole entire year. Disgusting. Glad it's over with. Please do not bring any green on Alfa Romeo because they do not know how to contrast it with that white and red. It also had these like crocodile teeth things on the side. Yeah, stick to what you're good at, Alfa. It's red and white. For Aston Martin, we're kicking it back way further down to when they were Benetton. And in my opinion, Benetton had some of the coolest liveries back in its time. But one livery from them was absolute disgusting. And here's a picture of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they were thinking with this livery. It's just a complete mess. I hated the way that Formula One cars looked like this in the time, but what they did to this, it kind of just looks like a kid took a crayon, said, hey, let's put green, red, yellow, black, purple. What other color could we add? I mean, they just did everything onto this car. There's a couple of these that look pretty bad, but I decided that this one was my least favorite out of all of them, so yeah, I went with this livery. Now, I did decide to do Haas and not the teams that were before it because Haas has been in F1 long enough to where I could pick a livery out of these. While I don't think many of them are disgusting, if any, I do think that this one is worse than the others. And it's definitely the gray one that they had in the 2017. This gray Haas livery, to me, looks like garbage. And yet again, it has the problem of having no sponsors on the actual side of the car. It had the Haas splattered over it. There's not really anything on the front wing whatsoever. It's just kind of a mess. They even put like name tags in the actual fin part because there was nothing else that they could add, so not much to say. I feel bad they didn't have that many sponsors and the car did not look good. So for Red Bull, I decided to go for the 2008 car. And I will say, I think out of all the teams, with the exception of Ferrari, Red Bull has very good liveries for the most part. What I did not like about this livery though, and I hope people agree because this one might be a controversial one, the '08 Red Bull has Red Bull on it in 15 different spots. Yes, I get it's the Red Bull car, I get it. But the McLaren car doesn't say McLaren, 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 McLaren all over the livery. This Red Bull car has it on the actual engine part itself. It has it on the side pod. It has it on the front wing. It has it on the top of the front wing. It has it on its rear wing. It has the logo splattered everywhere. It's just all Red Bull. And to me, it looks trash. It only improved over time. And yeah, they did have it on the side pod. And yeah, they did put it like along that like engine part. But they learned how to incorporate it with a whole bunch of different things. And as the teams obviously gained sponsors, they added more to it. But when it did not have many sponsors and their main income, obviously, which it still does come from Red Bull, but I mean, look at it. You tell me if I decided this was the right one. I definitely do think that this was the worst out of them all. And I'm sticking by it with my opinion. It was the worst out of a good pool of liveries, though, in the Red Bull team. Okay, for Ferrari, the 2021 Ferrari was the only Ferrari I could really choose. And listen. Ferrari has not had many bad cars throughout the years. The red and black, red and white, whatever they end up deciding to do, the car just looks good because red looks good on a Formula One car or any car. The famous saying from Ferrari himself, you give a kid, you tell a kid to draw a car, he'll draw it red every time. It's pretty true, and I agree to that saying, but they wouldn't draw it dark red and a green logo splattered all over it. It was an odd choice, and the way that the gradient works is just so trash. Like, it would have looked pretty cool if it was from dark red to like red but blending in, but just looking at it, the gradient is so awful. It looks like somebody took a spray can and kind of just like hoped that it'd look good, but it does not. It looks bad, and yeah, that was the worst livery that I could probably find out of all the other Ferrari liveries. For the most part, they're pretty good looking liveries. Last team I had on the list, and this is a hard one because there's actually a lot of good Toro Rosso / AlphaTauri liveries, and deciding to do one was tough, but I did it. The actual way that the Toro Rosso looked in 2015 and 2016 was way better than when it changed over to its 17, 18, 19 look. The darker purplish worked way better than the actual blue accent color that they had themselves. And the 2017 Red Bull Toro Rosso livery, to me, is the worst looking livery out of all of them. And I think it's a pretty trash livery. Like, looking at it, yet again, one sponsor, it's Red Bull. Obviously, it's a Toro Rosso team. But the colors just didn't look good on it. It didn't match up really well to how I thought the livery would have looked. And it was a disappointment from the beautifulness that they had before to what ended up actually coming out of this. You guys tell me if you agree. Do you guys agree with my list? You guys let me know. Put down in the comments your 3 least favorite looking liveries out of at least 3 teams here that I picked. And tell me why you chose those liveries. Please leave a like, a comment would be appreciated, subscribe, it would mean the world, and peace.